A weathered cardboard sign, hand-painted in blue ink, hung crooked on a mailbox at the corner of Maple Street. Moving sale, everything must go. The letters were slightly smudged, as if someone had rushed to finish before the rain started. Behind the sign, a driveway stretched toward a modest two-story house with peeling white paint and shutters that had seen better decades. Tables covered with mismatched tablecloths displayed the remnants of a lifetime, chipped ceramic bowls. Outdated electronics, books with bent spines, and jewelry that caught the morning light in unexpected ways. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Chun had never stopped at a garage sale in his 42 years of existence. The idea seemed foreign to him, almost archaeological. Why would someone with unlimited access to the finest things money could buy spend time sifting through other people's discarded possessions? His Tesla Model S Plaid sat idling at the curb, its sleek black exterior reflecting the suburban neighborhood like a mirror from another world. The contrast was jarring. Here was a car that cost more than most people's annual salary, parked outside a house, where someone was selling coffee mugs for 50 cents. The morning had started differently. Marcus was supposed to be heading to his private jet for a flight to New York, where a board meeting waited. Another acquisition, another merger, another opportunity to expand the tech empire he'd built from nothing. But his assistant had called 20 minutes earlier with news that the other party needed to reschedule. A family emergency, they said. Marcus understood family emergencies in theory, though he couldn't remember the last time he'd experienced one personally. So there he sat, in a neighborhood he'd never noticed despite driving past it countless times. The houses here weren't small, exactly, but they weren't the sprawling estates of his usual world either. They had front porches with actual chairs, mailboxes painted to match the front doors, and gardens that looked tended by human hands rather than professional landscaping crews. Children's bicycles lay scattered on driveways. Wind chimes hung from eaves, creating a gentle symphony that no amount of money could orchestrate. The garage sale called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the handwritten sign, so different from the polished marketing materials that filled his daily life. Maybe it was the curiosity of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to discover something unexpected. Or maybe it was simply the realization that he had nowhere else to be for the first time in months. Marcus stepped out of the Tesla, immediately conscious of how his Italian leather shoes sounded against the cracked asphalt. His navy blazer, tailored in London, felt suddenly overdressed for the morning sun and suburban quiet. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, breathing steady, and nodded in that neighborly way that Marcus had observed, but never participated in. He nodded back, the gesture feeling foreign on his face. The first table held kitchen items. Mixing bowls with hairline cracks, a stand mixer from the 1980s that probably weighed more than his laptop, and a collection of cookbooks with pages marked by decades of splattered ingredients. Marcus picked up a wooden spoon, worn smooth by countless stirring motions. The handle felt warm in his palm, carrying a history of meals prepared, families fed, celebrations marked with homemade dishes. His own kitchen, designed by a famous architect and equipped with appliances he'd never used, suddenly felt sterile by comparison. "That belonged to my grandmother," a voice said behind him. Marcus turned to see a woman in her early 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a faded university sweatshirt and jeans with grass stains on the knees. Her hands were dusty from moving boxes, and she wiped them on a dish towel before extending one toward him. "I'm Patricia Hendricks. This is my circus, unfortunately." Her handshake was firm, direct, the grip of someone who fixed her own leaky faucets and changed her own tires. Marcus introduced himself simply as Marcus, leaving off the last name that would have appeared in business magazines and tech journals. Patricia's eyes didn't widen with recognition. She didn't pull out a phone for a selfie or suddenly change her demeanor. She just smiled and gestured toward the array of items spread across multiple tables. "Moving somewhere warmer, I hope," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure why he was making small talk. Small talk was usually handled by assistants or avoided entirely. Patricia laughed, a sound that carried both humor and exhaustion. "Florida. My sister lives there, and frankly, these winters are getting harder to handle alone. 28 years in this house, and somehow you accumulate enough stuff to fill a warehouse. I keep finding boxes I forgot I had." Marcus nodded, though he couldn't relate to the concept of accumulating things over decades in one place. His properties were professionally decorated, regularly updated, and maintained by staff. Objects came and went based on design trends and functionality, not sentimental attachment. The idea of discovering forgotten boxes seemed almost romantic. He moved to the next table, where books were arranged in neat rows. Fiction, non-fiction, textbooks, children's books with worn covers that suggested they'd been read countless times. A cookbook caught his attention, not because he cooked, but because it was held together with rubber bands and sticky notes protruded from dozens of pages. Someone had used this book, really used it, marking favorite recipes and making notes. In the margins. "That was my daughter's," Patricia said, following his gaze. Patricia's expression shifted, pride mixing with something that looked like concern. "Emma's got bigger dreams than this neighborhood can hold. She's 26 and determined to open her own restaurant someday. Right now she's working 3 jobs, line cook at 2 different places and catering gigs on weekends. She says she needs to learn every aspect of the business before she can run her own." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, though he couldn't name it. Ambition, he recognized. Drive, determination, the willingness to work multiple jobs toward a larger goal. These were qualities he respected. But there was something else in Patricia's voice when she talked about her daughter, something he'd never heard in conversations. About business ventures or profit margins. "She sounds focused," he said. "Stubborn," Patricia corrected with a mother's fond exasperation. "Just like her father was. He had this crazy idea that he could build furniture that would last forever. Spent hours in the garage, sanding and staining and fitting pieces together like puzzles. Said anyone could buy furniture from a store, but making something with your hands, that was different." Marcus looked around the garage sale with new eyes. These weren't just discarded objects. They were pieces of lives lived fully, memories made tangible. The wooden spoon had stirred countless family dinners. The cookbook had guided a young woman's culinary education. Even the mismatched dishes had hosted celebrations and ordinary Tuesday nights with equal importance. "He passed away 3 years ago," Patricia continued, her voice gentle but steady. "Heart attack. Emma took it really hard. They used to plan restaurant concepts together at the kitchen table. She'd sketch out floor plans and menus while he drew designs for custom tables and chairs. They were going to be partners someday." The morning air seemed to shift around Marcus, carrying the weight of dreams interrupted and the resilience required to continue alone. He thought about his own path to success, the single-minded focus that had built his empire, the relationships that had been casualties along the way. Success, he'd always believed, required sacrifice. But standing in Patricia Hendrick's driveway, surrounded by the tangible evidence of a life shared with others, he wondered what he'd sacrificed without even realizing it. A car pulled up to the curb, and a family spilled out, parents with 2 young children who immediately ran toward the toys section of the sale. Patricia excused herself to help them, transforming instantly into a gracious hostess who seemed genuinely pleased to see her possessions find new homes. Marcus watched her explain the history of a wooden toy chest to the parents, how it had belonged to Emma and still had all its original pieces. The interaction fascinated him. In his world, transactions were efficient, anonymous, mediated by lawyers and accountants. Here, objects came with stories, connections, recommendations. The toy chest wasn't just a storage solution. It was a piece of childhood, tested and approved. By time and love, Marcus found himself drawn to a corner table where items seemed more carefully curated. A leather portfolio, well used but maintained. A collection of business books, their spines showing thoughtful wear. A small wooden box containing index cards covered with handwritten notes, recipes. He realized, written in precise cursive with measurements and techniques noted in the margins. "Those are Emma's," Patricia said, returning to his side. "Her recipe collection. She writes everything down the old-fashioned way. Says it helps her remember not just the ingredients, but the process, the feeling of creating something new." Marcus picked up one of the cards. "Honey lavender creme brulee. With cardamom tool," it read, followed by detailed instructions in handwriting that suggested both precision and creativity. At the bottom, a note: "Try with orange blossom next time. Dad would have loved the floral notes." Something about the card struck him deeply. This wasn't just a recipe. It was innovation, experimentation, the kind of creative thinking he valued in his business ventures. But more than that, it was personal. Emma Hendricks wasn't just learning to cook. She was learning to create experiences, to honor memory while pushing boundaries. "She's not selling these?" Marcus asked. Patricia shook her head. "Oh no, these are just out here by mistake. She'd kill me if she knew. She guards those recipes like state secrets. Says they're her competitive advantage," Patricia laughed. "Though I suppose that's true. She's already got restaurant owners asking her to cater their staff meals. And she's only been doing this for 2 years seriously." Marcus set the card down carefully, but his mind was racing. Competitive advantage, innovation, dedication to craft. These were the qualities he looked for when investing in new ventures, when identifying entrepreneurs worth backing. But Emma Hendricks wasn't in Silicon Valley or Manhattan. She was here, in this suburban neighborhood, working 3 jobs and writing recipes on index cards, while dreaming of a restaurant that might never exist without the right opportunity. The family with children had made their purchases and left, their car loaded with toys and books that would begin new chapters in different homes. Patricia began rearranging items on the tables, filling gaps where sold items had left empty spaces. The garage sale would continue without the wooden toy chest, but somehow it felt complete in its incompleteness, like a story that changes with each telling. Marcus realized he'd been standing there for almost an hour, longer than he'd spent in any single location, without a specific agenda in months. His phone had buzzed several times with messages from his office, but for once, he ignored them. Something was happening here, something he couldn't quantify or optimize or delegate. He was discovering what it felt like to be curious about people rather than just their potential value to his enterprises. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the driveway and bringing out neighbors who waved to Patricia like old friends. This was community, Marcus realized. This was what people meant when they talked about belonging somewhere, being known, having history that extended beyond professional achievements. Patricia Hendricks was saying goodbye to 28 years of memories, but she was also sharing them, allowing strangers to carry pieces of her family's story into their own lives. And somewhere in this neighborhood, her daughter Emma was probably prepping vegetables or developing new recipes, working toward a dream that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Marcus found himself wondering what it would be like to have that kind of vision, that willingness to work multiple jobs and experiment with cardamom tools while believing that someday, somehow, it would all come together into something extraordinary. The screen door at the back of the house slammed with a familiar bang that made Patricia look up from folding a vintage tablecloth. Heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen floor, accompanied by the sound of keys being tossed onto a counter. and the distinctive thud of work boots being kicked off near the door. Marcus watched Patricia's face transform, maternal concern replacing the pleasant sales demeanor she'd maintained all morning. You're home early," Patricia called toward the house, her voice carrying the particular note mothers use when they sense something isn't quite right with their children. The footsteps approached, and through the open doorway emerged a young woman who looked like she'd been wrestling with an industrial kitchen and lost. Her dark hair, clearly inherited from Patricia, was pulled back in a ponytail that had given up halfway through what must have been a brutal morning shift. Her chef's jacket was splattered with what looked like tomato sauce and something darker that might have been balsamic reduction. Flour dusted her black pants, and her face carried the exhausted frustration of someone who had just endured more than anyone should before noon on a Saturday. Emma Hendrick stopped short when she noticed Marcus standing beside the cookbook table, her green eyes taking in his expensive clothing with the quick assessment of someone accustomed to reading people from across a busy kitchen. Her expression shifted from surprise to embarrassment as she became suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, contrasted against this stranger's polished presence. "Sorry," she said, addressing both her mother and Marcus. "Didn't realize we had customers. I'll just—" She gestured vaguely toward the house, clearly intending to disappear inside and clean up. "Emma, honey, what happened?" Patricia stepped toward her daughter, abandoning the tablecloth entirely. "You weren't supposed to be home until 4. Emma's jaw tightened, and Marcus watched her struggle with whether to share whatever had happened or maintain the composed facade that service industry workers learn to perfect. The struggle played across her features, pride warring with exhaustion, professionalism battling with genuine hurt. "Chef Martinez fired me," she said finally, the words coming out flat and controlled, apparently suggesting improvements to a recipe that's been on the menu for 15 years constitutes insubordination and disrespecting the establishment's traditions. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, sweetheart." "It's fine," Emma continued, though her voice suggested it was anything but fine. "I made a honey thyme glaze for the pork tenderloin that would have elevated the entire dish. The other line cooks loved it. Even sous chef Williams said it was inspired. But God forbid someone with a culinary degree from YouTube University should have an opinion about how to make food actually taste good." Marcus found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn into the conversation despite himself. He recognized the tone, the barely contained frustration of someone whose innovations had been dismissed by people who mistook tradition for excellence. He'd encountered similar attitudes in boardrooms where executives preferred familiar failures to uncertain successes. "You made honey thyme glaze?" Patricia asked, as if this detail was particularly significant. Emma nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders as she spoke about the actual cooking. "I infused local honey with fresh thyme sprigs and a touch of white wine vinegar. The acidity cuts through the richness of the pork while the herbs complement the natural sweetness of properly cooked meat. It's not revolutionary, Mom. It's just ... better than drowning everything in the same brown sauce they've been using since the Clinton administration." Marcus watched this exchange with growing fascination. Emma wasn't just describing a recipe. She was articulating a philosophy of cooking that balanced respect for ingredients with creative enhancement. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the technical aspects, her hands moving to illustrate points about acid balance and flavor profiles. This was someone who understood both the science and the art of her craft. "The worst part," Emma continued, her voice gaining strength as she processed her anger, "is that I wasn't trying to show off or take over. I just wanted to contribute something meaningful. But apparently, wanting to improve things makes you a troublemaker in some kitchens." She glanced at Marcus, suddenly remembering his presence. "Sorry, you probably don't care about restaurant drama. Are you looking for anything specific? Mom's got some great deals on kitchen stuff, if you're into cooking." Marcus found himself At an unexpected crossroads, he could politely deflect, make a small purchase, and return to his Tesla with an interesting story about stumbling into suburban life. Or he could engage with this moment, this passionate young chef who had just lost her job for caring too much about excellence. "Actually," he said, his voice careful and genuine, "I'm very interested in restaurant innovation." "What you're describing, the honey thyme glaze, sounds like exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that successful establishments need." Emma's eyebrows rose slightly. "You work in restaurants?" "I work in business," Marcus replied, which was true without being complete. "I'm always looking for people who see opportunities where others see only tradition." Something shifted in Emma's posture. She straightened slightly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the confidence that must serve her well in professional kitchens. "Well, in that case, you should know that most restaurants fail because they prioritize familiarity over excellence. Customers think they want the same thing they had last time, but what they actually want is to be surprised by how good familiar things can be when someone cares enough to do them right." Patricia watched this exchange with growing curiosity, her eyes moving between her daughter and this well-dressed stranger, who seemed genuinely interested in Emma's culinary philosophy. Marcus could sense her maternal radar activating, trying to understand what was happening and whether it might be good or concerning. "That's a sophisticated perspective," Marcus said. "Most business owners struggle with balancing innovation and customer expectations. How do you think a restaurant could build a reputation for both reliability and creativity?" Emma's eyes sharpened with interest. This wasn't polite conversation anymore. This was the kind of strategic discussion she'd been craving in kitchens, where her ideas were dismissed before they could be properly considered. You start with perfect execution of basics, then gradually introduce elements that enhance without alienating. Like, you keep the pork tenderloin on the menu because people expect it, but you quietly upgrade the preparation and accompaniments until customers realize they're having the best version of something familiar they've ever tasted. Marcus nodded, impressed by the clarity of her thinking. "And if customers resist change?" "You don't announce the changes," Emma said with a slight smile. "You just make everything better and let them discover it naturally. People don't fear innovation. They fear bad surprises. If your innovations consistently improve their experience, they start trusting your judgment." This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking Marcus valued in entrepreneurs. Emma Hendricks wasn't just a skilled cook. She understood customer psychology, brand building, and the delicate balance between innovation and market acceptance. She was thinking like a business owner, not just an employee. "Emma," Patricia interjected gently, "maybe you should invite Marcus to try some of your cooking. You've got that new dessert recipe you've been perfecting." Emma looked mortified. "Mom, I'm covered in kitchen debris and probably smell like garlic. I can't just ... She gestured helplessly at her appearance. "Actually," Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness, "I'd be very interested in trying something you've created, if you don't mind the intrusion." Emma studied his face, searching for signs of pity or condescension. Finding neither, she seemed to make a decision. "Give me 15 minutes to clean up and change clothes. There's a lavender creme brulee I've been working on, not the one from the recipe card. Something completely new. If you're serious about understanding restaurant innovation, you should taste what's possible when someone has the freedom to actually innovate." As Emma disappeared into the house, Marcus realized he'd just committed to spending his unexpected free afternoon in ways he'd never imagined. Patricia began clearing space on one of the sale tables, moving items aside to create what looked like an impromptu dining area. "She's been working on that dessert for weeks," Patricia said quietly. "Testing different lavender varieties, adjusting the custard base, experimenting with complementary flavors. She treats every recipe like it's going to be the signature dish. That makes her reputation." Marcus helped move a box of books, struck by how naturally he'd fallen into this domestic moment. "She takes her craft seriously. She takes everything seriously," Patricia replied with maternal pride and concern. "Sometimes I worry she's too ambitious for her own good. This town doesn't have many opportunities for someone with her vision." The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with implications about dreams deferred and talents constrained by geography and circumstance. Marcus found himself wondering what Emma Hendricks might accomplish with proper resources and support. What innovation she might develop if she didn't have to fight for the right to improve honey glazes in restaurants that preferred predictable mediocrity. From inside the house came the sounds of someone moving with renewed purpose, shower running, drawers opening and closing. The determined preparation of someone who had just been given an unexpected opportunity to showcase their life's work to a stranger who might actually understand its value. 20 minutes later, Emma emerged from the house transformed. Gone was the defeated line cook in stained whites. In her place stood a confident young woman wearing dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that brought out the green in her eyes. Her damp hair was swept back in a neat bun, and she carried herself with the purposeful grace of someone who had decided to treat this unexpected encounter as a professional opportunity rather than a social accident. In her hands, she balanced a wooden tray that Marcus immediately recognized as handcrafted. The kind of artisanal piece that would cost hundreds of dollars in the boutique stores his interior designer frequented. But this one was clearly personal, worn smooth by use, with the subtle imperfections that marked something made by loving hands rather than factory machinery. "My father made this," Emma said, noticing his attention to the tray. "He said food tastes better when it's served on something that carries good intentions." The tray held 3 small ramekins filled with what looked like silky custard, topped with a thin layer of caramelized sugar that caught the afternoon light like amber glass. Beside them sat delicate tulle cookies shaped into elegant spirals, and small spoons that appeared to be real silver, polished to a gentle shine. "Lavender honey creme brulee with rosemary tuiles," Emma announced, setting the tray on the cleared table space. "The lavender is from a farm outside town. I convinced them to let me harvest specific plants based on bloom timing for optimal flavor concentration. The honey comes from hives that feed primarily on wildflower meadows, not commercial crops. So you get complexity without the cloying sweetness of processed varieties." Marcus watched her arrange the presentation with meticulous attention to detail. Every element was positioned deliberately, creating visual harmony that elevated what could have been a simple dessert into something approaching art. This wasn't someone who merely cooked. This was someone who understood that dining was an experience that engaged all the senses. The rosemary tuiles provide textural contrast and an herbal bridge between the floral custard and the caramelized sugar. Emma continued, her voice taking on the confident tone of someone explaining their expertise. "Most people think sweet and savory can't coexist in desserts, but that's because they haven't experienced proper flavor layering." Patricia had positioned herself nearby, ostensibly organizing sale items, but clearly invested in watching her daughter demonstrate her skills to this mysterious stranger who seemed genuinely interested in culinary innovation. Marcus sensed her protective presence and wondered how many times Emma had been disappointed by people who claimed interest in her work, only to dismiss it as cute or ambitious for a small-town girl. Emma handed Marcus one of the ramekins and a spoon. "The technique is traditional French, but I've modified the custard base to accommodate the lavender infusion without compromising the texture. Most people overpower delicate flavors with heavy cream, but I use a combination of whole milk and crème fraiche to create richness that enhances rather than masks." Marcus lifted the spoon, noting its weight and balance. Real silver, as he'd suspected, probably inherited and maintained with the kind of care that spoke to family traditions and respect for craftsmanship. The first bite was a revelation that caught him completely off guard. The custard was impossibly smooth, with a complexity that unfolded gradually across his palate. The lavender emerged first, subtle and floral, without the soapy intensity that ruined most amateur attempts at using the herb in desserts. Behind it came the honey, warm and nuanced, followed by a barely perceptible hint of vanilla that served as a bridge between the primary flavors. The caramelized sugar provided the expected textural contrast, but it had been torched to a precise degree that created bitter notes which balanced the overall sweetness. But it was when he tried the rosemary tool that Marcus truly understood Emma's vision. The cookie added a pine-like earthiness that shouldn't have worked with the delicate custard, but somehow created a flavor profile that was entirely unique yet completely harmonious. This wasn't fusion for its own sake. This was innovation-based, on deep understanding of how flavors interacted at a molecular level. "This is extraordinary," Marcus said, and he meant it completely. In his travels and business dinners, he'd eaten at restaurants with Michelin stars and celebrity chefs, places where meals cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. But this dessert, created in a suburban kitchen by a 26-year-old who had been fired that morning for caring too much about excellence, surpassed most of them. Emma's face flushed with pleasure at the genuine appreciation in his voice. "You really think so? I've been working on the flavor balance for weeks. The challenge is getting the lavender concentration right. Too little and it disappears. Too much and it overwhelms everything else." And the rosemary tools were actually an accident. I was making traditional almond tools, but grabbed the wrong herb container, and when I tasted the mistake, I realized it was better than what I'd originally planned. "Happy accidents are often the foundation of breakthrough innovations," Marcus replied, taking another spoonful of the creme brulee. "But recognizing when an accident is actually an improvement, that takes real expertise and confidence in your palate." Patricia approached the table, pride radiating from her maternal smile. Emma's been experimenting with herb combinations since she was 12. She had a little garden behind the garage where she grew things just to see how they'd taste together. Drove me crazy because she'd raid my spice cabinet for her research projects. "Mom," Emma protested, but she was smiling. "What?" Patricia continued, clearly enjoying her daughter's embarrassment. "You should know that this sophisticated dessert evolved from a girl who once convinced me to let her make lavender pancakes for Sunday breakfast. They were terrible, by the way. She hadn't figured out the concentration ratios yet." Marcus found himself laughing at the image of a 12-year-old Emma conducting flavor experiments in a backyard garden. "How did you know to keep experimenting after the pancake disaster?" Emma considered the question seriously. "Because I could taste the potential. The lavender pancakes were awful, but there was something in that first bite, just a hint of what it could become if I figured out the proportions. Most people would have given up, but I knew there was something worth pursuing." This answer struck Marcus with unexpected force. He recognized the mindset she was describing, the ability to see potential in failed attempts, to persist through disappointment, because you could envision what success might look like. It was the same quality that had driven him to rebuild his first startup 3 times before finding the formula that eventually made him wealthy. "That's the mindset of an entrepreneur," he said quietly. "Most people see failure and stop. But real innovators see failure as data, as information about what doesn't work that brings them closer to what does." Emma met his eyes directly. "Exactly. Every disaster teaches you something valuable if you're paying attention. The key is learning to distinguish between ideas that need refinement and ideas that are fundamentally flawed." Marcus took another bite of the creme brulee, savoring not just the complex flavors, but the story behind its creation. This wasn't just a dessert. It was evidence of someone who approached their craft with the rigor of a scientist and the soul of an artist. Emma Hendricks possessed the rare combination of technical skill, creative vision, and entrepreneurial thinking that he'd spent years searching for in potential business partners. "Emma," he said carefully, What would you do if you had unlimited resources to pursue your culinary vision? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and implication. Emma's eyes widened slightly, as if she wasn't sure whether he was asking hypothetically or offering something real. Patricia stepped closer, maternal instincts sensing that this conversation was moving beyond casual interest. Emma set down her spoon and looked directly at Marcus. I'd create a restaurant that changed how people think about familiar foods. Not molecular gastronomy or fancy techniques for their own sake, but thoughtful innovation that makes every dish the best version of itself it could possibly be. A place where tradition and creativity support each other instead of competing. Marcus nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of vision that created successful businesses, clear purpose, combined with market understanding and the technical skills to execute at the highest level. Emma Hendricks wasn't just a talented cook. She was an entrepreneur who happened to work in food. The afternoon sun slanted across the garage sale tables, casting long shadows that marked the passage of time. Other customers had come and gone, purchasing items and carrying away pieces of the Hendricks family history. But here at their improvised tasting table, something entirely new was beginning to take shape. A connection that had nothing to do with the garage sale and everything to do with the recognition of shared ambition and complementary skills. Marcus finished the last spoonful of creme brulee and realized he was about to make a decision that would change both their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Marcus pulled out his phone, hesitating before opening his web browser. Emma, there's something I need to tell you. His finger hovered over the search bar as he typed his own name. The first result showed his photo alongside headlines about tech acquisitions and venture capital investments. Forbes articles, business magazine covers, investment portfolio worth over $2 billion. Emma's face went pale as she read. You're Marcus Chen, she whispered, stepping backward. Marcus Chen, venture capitalist, tech mogul. Her voice trailed off as the implications hit her. Patricia gasped from the doorway. Oh my goodness. You've been evaluating me this whole time, Emma said, her voice tight with betrayal. The questions about business plans, funding strategies, this was all some kind of assessment. No, Marcus said quickly. That's not how this started. But Emma was already shaking her head. I shared my recipes, my dreams, and my father's workshop. I thought you were just someone who understood good food. Instead, you're someone who could fund my entire restaurant concept without blinking. Does that change what we discussed? Does it make your creme brulee less extraordinary? Emma's eyes flashed. It makes everything a lie. You sat there pretending to be impressed by my $5,000 kitchen setup, when you probably spend more than that on a single business dinner. I think you should leave, Emma said quietly, her arms crossed defensively. Marcus nodded, understanding her need for space. Your dessert was the best I've ever had. That's not a billionaire talking to a chef. That's a human being talking to an artist. After he left, Emma sat in her kitchen staring at the empty ramekins. Patricia joined her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Honey, maybe he genuinely— Mom, don't. Emma's voice cracked. For 2 hours, I felt like my work mattered to someone who understood excellence. Now I find out he was probably thinking about tax write-offs and charitable investments. 3 days passed. Marcus returned to his penthouse office, but couldn't concentrate. Every gourmet meal tasted flat compared to Emma's lavender creme brulee. He caught himself researching small restaurant investments, reading about culinary innovation programs. His assistant Mila found him staring out the window at the city below. Sir, the Richardson merger needs your attention. Cancel it, Marcus said suddenly. Cancel everything this week, sir. I need to figure out how to apologize to someone who doesn't want my money. Saturday morning found Marcus back at 412 Maple Street, but this time he wasn't alone. A small moving truck sat in the driveway, and workers were carefully loading Patricia's remaining furniture. Emma emerged from the house carrying a box, freezing when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" Marcus held up a manila folder. "I brought you something." No strings attached, no investment required. Curious despite herself, Emma opened the folder. Inside were legal documents transferring ownership of a downtown commercial property, the same location she'd identified in her business plan as ideal, but financially impossible. "I can't accept this," she said immediately. "It's not charity," Marcus replied. "It's an acknowledgement that some people deserve the chance to prove their vision without financial barriers, preventing them from trying." "Why?" Marcus looked at the garage sale tables being folded and stored. "Because your father built you a fermentation chamber without understanding fermentation. Because you've worked 3 jobs while perfecting recipes that restaurants would pay fortunes to feature. Because excellence should be rewarded with opportunity, not obstacles." Emma studied his face, searching for hidden agendas. "What do you want in return?" "Permission to be your first customer when you open. And maybe the chance to be friends with someone who judges people by their character instead of their net worth." Patricia watched from the porch as her daughter considered this unexpected offer. Emma looked at the property deed, then at Marcus, then at her mother. "Partners," she said finally. "Not charity recipient and benefactor. Equal partners with equal say in business decisions." Marcus smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." 6 months later, Hendricks & Chun opened quietly on Main Street. No grand opening, no celebrity chefs, just neighbors discovering that the best lavender creme broly in the world was being served 3 blocks from where it was first perfected. The garage sale sign still hung in Marcus's office, a reminder that the most valuable discoveries often happen when you're not looking for them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.